Hey, it's Rob from sortitoutside.net and welcome to our latest video. We're going to be looking at the Parma squad in Football Manager 2014. If you haven't looked at this before, you might be a bit surprised to find out that within the normal three squads that we're used to, senior squad, reserve squad and under-19s, Parma have a total of 303 players. This isn't that uncommon in Italy. People that are aware of Watford's relationship with Udinese will know that Udinese have, I think it's about nearly 200 players that are on loan at Watford, Granada and various other countries, teams around the world. Parma seem to have more than anyone else in terms of loans. 303 players is just insane. As we can see here, I've selected all the loan players. 181 of them are out on loan. In fact, 206 out of the 303 are not at the club at all because of co-ownerships. Now, what's the point of this video? What I want to see is what will happen over the next 4 or 5 years. Surely at the end of the season, all these players are going to come back and Parma are going to have 303 players on their books, and they're going to have to try and either sell or loan out another 200 of them. Can Football Manager cater for this? Or will Parma just become absolutely screwed? I've never played in the Italian leagues before. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to play out, so I thought I'd make this video of me investigating how it will play out so that you guys can learn about the Italian leagues and how this sort of situation works as well. You never know, we may decide that Parma could make quite a nice challenge, but we're going to see how it goes. We may want to start by just having a little look at some of the players that are out on loan. You see all the players highlighted in blue are the ones that are away from Parma on loan, and you see they're not all kids. You'd think the idea behind having 300 odd players would be to have a number of youth products developing at other clubs that could eventually come back to Parma. But you see here, I mean, there are players there over 30, there's loads in their mid-20s, and they're all on the Parma books, and some of them you'd imagine have reached their peak, or it would have become clear that they'll never be good enough for Parma, yet Parma retain them on their books and loan them out to other sides. One of your first thoughts might be, who the hell's paying the wages for 300 players? Fortunately for Parma, you'll see that there we go, Sassuolo pay, probably pronounced that wrong, but they pay the wages for the duration of the loan, and that's about the same for most of the good players, or the players that are on a lot of wages, so it's not too much of a problem for Parma at this stage. Of course, when they all come back at the end of the season, Parma are suddenly going to have 300 players and be paying their wages every single week, which, as you can imagine, will massively affect their bank balance. I've taken over Parma for the purposes of just showing this, but what I'm going to do is let the game play through without a human manager, and then at various intervals I'll take back over control so that I can look at their finances and whatnot. So the AI is going to be managing this team. I'm not going to have any input in what happens to players at the end of this year. Now, one thing worth looking, you can see that Parma are currently spending £4,000 over their wage budget, and what that means is, so they've got £4,000 free, and they've got 27,000 available for key players, 20,000 first team. Not an amazing amount, it's not the Chelseas and the Man Cities and the Man Uniteds, but it's a solid amount. They don't seem to be in too much trouble financially at the moment. Salary commitments, you can see it massively dwindling over the next few years, presumably as players' contract run out. £425,000 a week is a pretty insane amount. I'm not sure if that takes into consideration the players out on loan or not. I assume it does. So all I'm going to do now is fast forward to the end of the season and see what happens when all 200 odd players that are not at the club come back. What we want to know is how many of them will be retained, and of the ones that are retained, what happens to them? Are they loaned out, or do they just languish in the reserves? And also, what happens to Parma's finances? If they are staying at the club, how are they going to afford to pay 300, or if some leave 200 plus players' wages? I imagine there'll also be a morale issue as well. One thing I didn't already mention is that I mentioned that more players aren't at the club than just loans. They also have a number of co-ownerships, which is common in Italy. Basically what happens is two teams can own the rights to the same player, but it only appears at one club. The PR there stands for participation rights. Yep, participation rights. So you see this player, Anacora, at the top. He is owned both by Juventus and Parma, but Juventus have the participation rights, which mean they can register him in a competition. Although in this case he's actually loaned out to Cuneo. Again, probably an awful pronunciation there, but you can see what I mean. So there's two parts to Parma's massive collection of players here. They have lots of players on their books that are wholly owned by them and are out on loan, and they have a number of players whom they own co-ownerships of. So they have their finger in many, many pies. And we want to know whether Football Manager can handle this sort of setup, and whether they will continue like this over the forthcoming years, or whether they'll wind up just being the same as any other club, a normal Premier League club with 50 odd players, and maybe these 300 odd players will all just work their way out, or maybe Parma will go completely bankrupt, which is a massive possibility when you've got 300 players on the books. So here we are after the first season, and you see that Parma now have 258 players in their squad, which means they've lost 45 from the 303 we started with. We can also see that they no longer have any players out on loan. We fast forwarded to the 1st of July, which is when most players' loans expire and contracts expire, meaning they can leave on a free. The players highlighted in faded red there are players that Parma co-own but are not currently in the Parma squad. They don't have participation rights to play for Parma at the moment. So let's try and find out where these 45 players have gone to. Let's go look at the transfer history. You see last season a few players left on loan after we first took over, and a couple left on free transfer as well, presumably released or mutually terminated. Now at the end of this season you can see a bunch of players have left on free transfers for the end of the transfer window, and a few more have joined clubs for money, either loan arrangements that had future transfer fees or potentially co-ownership deals that have been bought out. There are actually only 28 people here that have left, and like I said, they've gone down by 45. I think part of the reason for that is a drop in co-ownerships, which has dropped to 25, whereas before it was 46. So you see an obvious drop already. Parma used to have 46 co-ownerships, now they only have 25. Presumably the AI is not taking interest in creating more co-ownerships. Let's go have a little look at the finances now. We can see that they are spending well over their wages now with all these players come back. That's 258 I said they have, and they're spending 83,000 over their wage budget, which has mean they're restricted to giving just £2,000 a week to key players and £900 a week to first team players, and there's next to no money for rotational backup players, which, as you can imagine, when you've got 250 players, you think you'd have enough backups or players to rotate. But clearly having all these players is causing a problem. When you look at how much they spent on wages last year, and it was around £30 million. So our first thought is not too much a change. They've obviously got rid of about 50 players, which would make sense when lots of them are coming to the end of their contracts. What I'm going to do now is just fast forward to the end of this transfer window to September and see if they shifted 200 odd players out on loan again, as you would expect. Now here we are on the 30th of September 2014, which is after the transfer window is closed and Parma should have done all their business. We now see that the total size of the squad has changed to 214, so it's dropped by about another 50. We can go have a look at what's happened to all those players. Remember, it was the 1st of July that we were looking for, which is here. So After this, you can see a few players have gone out of loan, but a few have left for money as well. And then on the 22nd of August, a whole raft of players were released on a free. There's no real reason for that. There's no contract expiry dates generally happening on the 22nd of August or anything like that. It just seems like that date was chosen for a bit of a squad clear out. Presumably all these players were released or left on mutual terminations. And then there's a few more players going out on transfers, and it looks like Parma have completed a few loans, but it definitely does not look like there are the 181 loans that they started with 1 year ago. In fact, there are only 20. I've just counted it up. So now they've dropped from 303 players to 214 and 181 players out on loan to just 20. Let's have a little look at how this is affecting their finances. Now we can see that they are just a little bit over their wage budget, but only about 3,000. But they're allowed a lot more per player. Well, key player anyway, 10,000. Although first team or rotation squad, there's still not a lot of money available. But 10,000 for a key player is better than the 2,000 they were allowed just 3 months ago. To keep things snappy, I'm just going to skip straight ahead till the end of 2015. Oh wait, no, I just forgot we should look at the co-ownerships briefly. See how many of those there are. And there's still a similar number of co-ownership. There were 25 previously, now there's 27, so it looks like they've invested in 2 more co-ownerships, although most of them are away from Parma, so it's kind of similar to loaning a player out. Not exactly the same, but kind of similar. Anyway, let's switch to July 2015 and see how another year sees Parma's squad develop. So here we are at the end of the second season, July 2015. I can tell you this is the year of the biggest change. Whereas Parma started with 303 players, last September they had 214, now they have just 97 players, which is a massive come down. Nearly 200 players have left the club in the last 2 years. We can see how they've left the club in different ways with the transfer history. This is this year, so you can see all these players leaving at the end of their contracts on the 30th of June. As you can see from the last few years, most of the players they've had on loan have wound up leaving on a free transfer, although quite a few have been for small amounts of money. Last season, after we left them in September, a few players left, 9 people, one of them was on loan. Not all of them have left the club or were at the club originally. Remember, there were some co-ownerships, massive drop in co-ownerships. I can't remember how many we said we had in the last video, but they're down to just 1 now. So a number of players have left with that way. They've obviously sold them off. Obviously a lot of them weren't at Parma originally. They weren't players that were registered to play for Parma, but clearly the clubs they were registered for have decided to buy them out, or some other clubs have decided to buy them. So that's another maybe 20, 30 odd players that are no longer have any association with Parma. Now, losing 200 players, you'd imagine they had a lot more money. And we can see that, yeah, they've massively under their wage budget, got 125,000 available and 66,000 available to spend on key player, 50,000 on first team and 32,000 on rotation. They even got a bit of money for backup players, which shows how far they've come. You can see they've got 27 not needed players there. I think that was about 100 odd last time, so obviously they're getting rid of all these players that they've set to not needed, but keeping a few of the prospects. And you can see the actual players that are set up to play in the first team is a rough average, what's that, 25 players? Yeah, 24 players, that's about right for a first team squad. Parma are becoming just like every other club in the game, nothing unusual. So let's skip ahead very quickly to September 2015, see if it changes anymore. So now we'll skip ahead to September 30th, which is only a couple of months. Not that much have changed. There are 97 players before, then we've got 83, so another 14 have left. We can see quick transfer history. I just want to look down the bottom, and 18 people have left, 9 are on loan. So still loaning out a few players, but it's obviously not such a huge thing as it was at the start of the game when they had 200 players out on loan. Problem finances. They had 125,000 available before, they've only got 7,000 available now, so obviously losing all these players has meant that they have freed up some wages to bring in some new players. I don't know if that's gone on player wages or player transfer fees, I guess we can very quickly look at that. They spent 12 million. We didn't check what their budget was in the last video, but certainly they've had some money to spare that they haven't had in recent years. Certainly not at the start, when they didn't have any money in or any wages free. To keep things snappy, because you can kind of tell where this is going, I'm now just going to skip ahead to 30th September 2016 rather than going to July like I normally do, because I have a feeling we're going to start getting to the end of this and most of Parma's unwanted players will have gone. Once again, I forgot co-ownerships. They had 1 before, gone up to 3 now. 2 of them are at Parma, so presumably they're players they brought in maybe because they want them to play in the first team, I'm not sure. They're co-owned by Juventus, so you imagine they're alright players. It's not totally clear why Parma would want those players. They're not that young. If they're not going to play in the first team, I'm not sure why they'd want them. But there's some co-ownerships going on, but not the 40 plus we saw at the start. So now here we are in 30th September 2016, which is the end of the 3rd season. One interesting thing to note before I carry on, you can see Daniel Osvaldo here and Ciro Immobile, probably haven't pronounced that correctly. They're on higher wages than Parma have had in recent years. Normally highest wage is about 30,000, now they're splashing 50-odd thousand on Daniel Osvaldo. So clearly they're spending a bit more on wages. Player numbers wise, when we left them off just now, they had 83 players left of the 303. They now have 52 players in their squad. So massive come down. That's about a normal squad. This is all their squads, it's not just their first team, that's a reserve squad and under 19, so that's all their youth products as well. 52 really isn't that big a squad, and a lot smaller than Parma would be having in real life. Obviously you can already get what this means, or what I'm trying to get at. Football Manager obviously cannot handle the way that Italian clubs actually do business. It seems to be stuck in this one method of managing a team, well, the way the AI manages a team anyway, of just doing it the same way the English clubs do it, and this realistic way that, say, Parma or Udinese or any other team has hundreds of players on their books and loans them out for the world, lets them develop. This is not replicated in Football Manager. It's there from the start, obviously, but after just 3 seasons, it's been completely removed and obliterated, and Parma do not continue in a realistic fashion. As you can see from the wages, they're now spending 26,000 over what they were before. You can see from the graph up the top here that it has steadily increased over 3 years. It increased most obviously after the first season, when obviously all those players come back, and it has to increase, and then it stayed about that same 600,000 level for most of that time. So obviously once the main collection of players that come back leave the club, the wages go up and Parma suddenly have more money to invest in squad, but only after about 3 seasons. We can have a quick look at who's left in this 3rd season. See a load of players on a free transfer again. They were presumably the ones that had 3-year contracts. They're finally starting to expire. So pretty much all the players they didn't want at the very beginning have finally been able to be shifted. A few have left for money again. Only 3 players have gone out on loan, which isn't realistic to the way Parma do business at all. As we saw at the beginning, they had 200 odd loan players. Co-ownerships, they're now down to just 2 again. Again, they had 40 plus in the beginning, so obviously co-ownerships are not a huge thing in Football Manager. They should be, because they're a huge thing in Italy. So again, a bit of a realism issue here with the Italian leagues. But I think that's basically the end of the video. I might skip forward just 1 more year to 2017 just to see what's going on, but I think we've got the gist of what happens here. The AI in Football Manager is set up to play a certain way, to manage the squad in a certain manner, and they cannot handle the realistic way that Parma and Udinese and teams like that handle the ownership of players, having hundreds of players on their books and loaning them out, co-ownerships and whatnot. They just want it to work the same way it does in the Premier League. You have a squad of about 20-25 players and a youth system of reserves of about 25 odds. You've got a total squad of about 50 people, and that's a bit of a shame. For the most realistic Football Manager simulation in the world, it can't seem to handle the way the Italians do business. So here we are in September 2017. Very little has changed. There's 53 players, there were 52 before, so it's gone up by 1, but you can see it's about that same sort of level. Of those 53, only one player, this guy, Eder, is out on loan. So obviously the Parma system of loaning out 200 odd players is not being replicated in Football Manager. Co-ownerships. Only one co-ownership, again not being replicated. Transfer history, you see the last few remaining players maybe, or maybe they were first teamers, I'm not sure. I remember Rossi was definitely out on loan at the start. Either way, some of the deadwood still drifting out after 4 seasons, but for the most part Parma's just become your generic run-of-the-mill mid-table side, just like in the Premier League, and nothing unique about the Italian leagues left in Football Manager after 4 years. I hope you enjoyed this little look at Italy. If you haven't managed there before, you may see this Parma squad of 300 plus players a bit of a challenge, or maybe I'll put you off playing in Italy at all. 1, because of the struggle you're going to have financially, 2, because of the complete lack of realism and the fact that all the other clubs will just wind up like generic Premiership teams after a few years, because it seems to be the only way that Football Manager can handle squad management, or the AI can handle squad management. Anyway, I haven't done a video for a while. Hopefully I'll be back with some more soon, but I hope you enjoyed this one. Cheers.